Thanks, Brother Darryl, and good afternoon. Welcome, friends. Population facts proving the Bible true. So before we delve into our topic this afternoon, I just want to clarify something. When it comes to the topic of proving the Bible true, I've never previously turned to world population facts as evidence to prove my belief. And there may be good reason for that. Other people might have different ideas, but I don't believe that world population as a standalone topic proves that the Bible is true. But what it does do is put a hole in non-Bible believers' theories and also provides icing on a relatively large cake that disproves atheist assumptions. And of course, the evidence that makes up a very large cake to disprove atheistic assumptions are the topics in our current series. Some that we've already covered: the Jewish nation, archaeology, prophecy, the complexity of biological systems, etc., etc. To me, these are the ingredients to a large cake of evidence of which world population is merely the sprinkles on the icing on the cake that dispels atheistic assumptions. Now, for those of us who might be listening online or sitting here in the hall that might be mathematicians that believe the Bible, who understand formulas and calculations on population growth that support the Bible, I give you my apologies. However, this afternoon we will look at some population stats and averages that both Bible believers and non-believers can agree on. We will look at some assumptions that you will only agree with depending on which side of the fence you sit on. And then, because I am a Bible student, I will put forward a case that the account of the biblical flood is supported by current population stats. And also we'll pose a question at the end regarding world population that I don't believe that non-believers are unable to answer. Or are able to answer, I should say. Okay, so let's look at an overview. For those that don't know, we actually hit 8 billion world population this year. So this video is the latest, but the other couple of videos that we're going to play later on come from the era of about 2015 to 2019 when we had 7 billion. So this one's up to date. The others will refer to 7 billion.
The global population is projected to hit an all-time high on Tuesday, reaching the landmark figure of 8 billion people. That's according to the United Nations. The world's population has doubled in less than 50 years and is set to keep rising. Our medical editor, Fergus Walsh, has been examining what the figures mean for us all.
Our planet has never held so many people as the era of huge population growth continues. Back in 1800, there were around 1 billion people on Earth, and it took over a century for that to double. Then it really took off in the 20th century, reaching 3 billion in 1960 and putting on nearly 1 billion each decade after that. It reached 7 billion in 2011. We're now set to hit 8 billion people on the planet. So what about the future? The UN projects there'll be 9 billion people by around 2037 and 10 billion by 2058. Global population could peak at around 10.4 billion in the 2080s and then plateau before declining in the next century. The United Nations says more than half the projected population increase to 2050 will be in just 8 countries. Half of them are in sub-Saharan Africa. Indeed, the total population of this entire region is set to almost double to 2 billion by 2050. Remember, it includes some of the world's least developed countries, many already experiencing food insecurity. India and China are the world's most populous countries. Both are home to more than 1.4 billion people, but India will overtake China next year. China's population, along with scores of other countries, is set to fall sharply later this century. Now that's because global fertility is declining dramatically. Back in 1950, women gave birth on average to 5 children. That has since more than halved to 2.3 births, and it's set to fall even further. But there are so many people of childbearing age now, that explains why the global population will keep rising for much of this century. Another reason is we're living longer. Average global life expectancy reached almost 73 years in 2019, up almost 9 years since 1990. COVID actually pushed it down by nearly 2 years, but it's projected to keep rising. The world's population is also aging. About 1 in 10 people on the planet is now 65 or older. By 2050, it'll be almost 1 in 6, so that will put a greater burden on the young. Our growing population also puts increasing pressure on resources, food, water, energy, as well as infrastructure. Huge issues for society with lasting implications for our planet.
Pretty good overview. Thanks to the BBC for that. Couldn't have said it any better myself. So let's just rattle off a few facts. So in the past, the population obviously did grow slower than our current rates that we just saw, and that you can also see up on the screen. It took nearly 7 centuries for the population to double, from 250 million in the early 9th century to 500 million in the middle of the 16th century. And as the growth rate slowly climbed, the population doubling time fell, but remained in the order of centuries into the first half of the 20th century. And there things sped up considerably in the middle of the 20th century, as you can see on the screen. The fastest doubling of the world population happened between 1950 and 1987, where it jumped from 2.5 to 5 billion people in just 37 years. The population doubled within a little more than 1 generation, and this period was marked by peak population growth of 2.1% in 1962. So hopefully I can explain this next screen. People that know me well know I'm not into my maths, but I'll give it a crack. So this is the little graph that we just saw on the other screen and that the BBC was talking about. That's the growth rate in billions. And there's the years down here. And then what it was talking about in the 1960s, this percentage growth peak was 2.8, I believe, I just read out. Yep. So that is declining. So even though the BBC sort of claim that things are looking pretty bad, we're actually, families aren't having as many babies even though our population keeps growing. So we're down here now. So the population percentage growth rate is about 0.84%. So that's that side there. So as you can see, even though we are growing, the percentage population rate per family, per couple is dropping. Anyway, there's some stats to get your head around. It only took me a couple of weeks. Hopefully you can get it in one afternoon. So it doesn't look like it, but the population growth is slowing. And the doubling time, as we just said, that's at 0.84%, is lowering. They are projecting that by the 2080s, it'll once again have taken approximately 100 years for the population to double to a predicted 10.4 billion. And there are mathematical formulas that they use to calculate that, and it's pretty accurate. Okay, there's the stats done with. So the question that we'd like to pose to bring us back to our topic is, how long have we been on Earth? We're not talking about how old the Earth is. How long has mankind been on the Earth? Is it round about 6,000 years, as Bible students say, or is it 1 million plus, up to 10 million years, is what some scientists will say? So that's the question that we're going to look at now. So according to the non-Bible believer, the first humans started on the earth between 1 million to 10 million years ago, and they argue with the Bible student that it's impossible for the world population to be at 8 billion today, or 7 billion if you're talking to them a few years ago, with only 4,500 years of history. And that's since the time of Noah's flood, hence why we got Brother Darrell to read about Noah. So Bible students believe that it is totally possible for there to be 8 billion people today, allowing for 4,500 years since the flood. So how do we sort of unpack that? So when you allow for the number of times that the world's population has doubled, so from Noah through to today, or even if you don't believe in Noah, from billions of years ago to today. We know we've got 8 billion now. It started at 0 or 2 or 10, depending on which evolutionist theory you look at. But we believe it started with 6 to 8 people if you count Noah's day. So when you allow for the number of times that the world's population has doubled since, we'll say, because we're Bible students, the flood, the population would have approximately doubled on an average, or at a rate of, it doubles once every 150 years. And that, we're going to have a look at that in a minute. Now, Brother Robin did explain it to me earlier. I believe that that's called arithmetic progression. Okay, hopefully some of you know what that means. Okay, so the population would approximately double on average at a rate of once every 150 years. Let's have a look. Okay, so 4,500 years, where do we come up with that? So you can read it through chronological order in the Bible that Noah's existed around about 2,500 years before Christ. And then you add where we are today, 2024, you add those together and you come up with 4,500 years. Okay. Then, when you consider that we had 8 people at Noah's day, or 6 if you're going to consider that it was only his sons that reproduced. Noah didn't reproduce anymore after the flood. But when you go from 6 or around about 8 to 8 billion, if you put them side by side, that's 30 times that the world population doubles. So if you go from 8, being Noah and his sons, to 16, that's 2, 32 is 3, 64 is 4. So we've got 10 up there, and you've already got to 4,000, and then you add that you double that another 20 times to make it 30, and you're going to come up with roughly 8 billion. Okay, hopefully you're still with me. Hopefully I'm still here. Now, when you divide the number of years, when we consider Noah and the flood to where we are today, by the number of doublings, the amount of times that we say the Earth's population has doubled to get to 8 billion people, which is 30, you come up with 150 years on average. So that's important to remember, it's only an average. So there's going to be years in our history where we didn't double anywhere near 150 years, and there's other times we exceeded it. Well and truly would have exceeded it, like we are today. But it's on average. So what does that mean? Why do we care? First of all, I'll put to you that it's not a stretch. And look, that when we're talking about the 8 to 8 billion, that's a mathematical formula. That you don't have to be a Bible student to pick that one out, but we are picking the time. We're picking the 4,500 years from the Bible. But you can apply that 30 doublings, that mathematical formula and that logic, I should say, to anything. And it does apply to a lot of things, particularly if you're into finance and you're into your exponential growth and all that. And we'll see that on video shortly. Okay, so it's not hard at all to, I guess, consider or accept that the population on average does double, because it's actually done it very recently, not that long ago, a couple of centuries ago. So we know for a fact that in the 1600s, or is that the 1700s, 1650 AD, there was approximately 600 million, and in the 1950s, we were at 2.4 billion, or 2,400 million if you want to keep it on the same level. So that means 300 years, it doubled it's doubled. So that gives us an average of 150 years that our population growth doubles. Okay. So if you apply the same mathematical formula, the percentage formula, to mankind being on the earth for, let's just say, let's forget about the 100 millions or the 10 million years that they throw out there. Let's just say 1 million. Let's keep it nice and clean. If you consider that for today's population count at 8 billion people, which is 34 doublings, this would mean that the average time that the world's population to double was about 29,000 years. So again, that's 34 doublings to get from 1, or whatever it is that they say, through to about 1 million. So when you consider 29,000 years, on average, to get to 4 people, to get to 8 people, to get to 16, count it all the way up to 8 billion where we are today, we're talking about 29,000 years in between each doubling. So that, to me, that's, and I don't know math, as you can tell, but that's an impossibly slow growth, if you ask me. Even if the average time that the population doubled in the past was as slow as, say, once every 1,000 years, not 29,000, but just 1,000 years, that is 1/25th of the present growth rate. And this would put the first pair of humans on Earth around about 31,500 years ago. Not millions, 31,500 years ago. So to me, what makes more sense here, logic of using Bible data in your formula, or having a view of we just evolved and it was millions of years ago? I'll let you decide what you think sounds more plausible. So some people not willing to believe that mankind was created only a few thousand years ago claim that the world's population has been almost wiped out many times. That's how they account for 29,500 years in between, because we've nearly been wiped out several times. Well, clearly we haven't completely been wiped out entirely. Now, while some people will assert that human population has been almost wiped out a number of times without providing any evidence to back it up, these same people won't accept the Bible account that the population was wiped out, that Brother Darryl just read out for us. And that was by the great flood in the time of Noah. All right, I'll stop waffling on and let's have another look at a video. And again, we're going to be talking about 7 billion because this is a while ago.
We like to tackle a lot of hot topics on the program. And some people come up and they say, David, listen, there's, 7 billion people on the planet today. There's a lot of people out there. And you're trying to tell me that all of these people originated from Adam 6,000 years ago. Was it Adam that we're talking about, or was it even later?
Actually, it was even later than that.
Okay.
We only have about 4,500, if we can round off, for about 4,500 years to explain everyone on Earth today from the flood.
That's right. That's what most people don't think about at first glance. We're not talking about Adam here. Yes, Adam was the first person, but there was a culling down to only 8 people on the ark at the time of the flood, around 4,500 years ago. And from those people, everyone must have originated.
It's actually less than 8.
Okay.
Because from Shem, Ham, and Japheth, from these the whole earth descended, the Bible says. Therefore, we actually only have 6 people, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their 3 wives, and we have to explain more than 7 billion people in 4,500 years.
Wow. Is that doable?
Well, that's a great question, isn't it?
The average human population grows by about 83 to 86 million every single year. There's about 7 billion people on the planet. How long do you think people have been on the planet?
A long time. I don't have an exact number. I think we've been longer than most people think.
Longer than most people think. Are you thinking millions? Are you thinking thousands? Are you thinking what?
I'm thinking thousands. I don't think millions, because if it was millions, we would have a lot more history to share, and I don't think we have enough. So,
I don't know how you project that. I mean, because you got calamities and times when entire populations and world groups have been wiped out, but let me just throw out 6,000 years.
How long do you think that humans have been on Earth?
Humans, that's a tricky question. Me personally, my outlook on it is that I think that the human species is something new to the planet Earth. Okay. I think there was a life form here before us.
Let me show you some charts that people are familiar with.
Okay.
Usually, you like an investment account. Say, if you put your money in our account at this rate of return, you'll be a millionaire by the time you retire. We hear stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's called compounding interest.
Okay.
And what happens over time is things grow and grow and grow. And what they do is they grow exponentially. The slope of the curve goes like that. And hopefully it's doing that when you're about to retire.
So you put $10 in when you're 10 years old, and that doesn't sound like a lot.
Sound like a lot.
But the exponential curve means that you could retire a millionaire.
Yeah, you might only have $11 when you're 20 years old, but by the time you're 65 or 70, you might have a lot of money in there.
Okay, so we may even rock along really steady for a while, and it still doesn't seem like much, but there comes a point where it sort of tips.
Well, if you zoom up, you always get the same slope.
Okay.
If you zoom out, so exponential growth is just a really neat mathematical thing. It's a very elegant formula, which is basically, if you know the number you start with, n, they call it n naught, n with a little zero next to it, and you multiply that times that wonderful mathematical number e, I love e, raised to an exponent of the growth rate and time. You can calculate your big N, how many numbers or how many things you'll have at some point in time.
So what you're saying is that this doesn't just apply to the dollars that we put in the bank savings account. We can use this as far as human population is concerned.
Yes. Another example that people are a little less familiar with, but they kind of have the idea, is in radiometric decay.
Okay.
Same formula. When you start with like a lump of radiocarbon, carbon-14, if you had a pure ball of carbon-14, in a little more than 5,000 years, about half of that will have disintegrated.
Okay.
And then a little more than 5,000 years after that, another half will have disintegrated. So you go to 1/2, 1/4, 1/8, 1/16, 1/64 eventually. And what you get, you have a negative curve. Looks just like the bank example going
Just
in the other
opposite.
direction.
Okay.
So this is exponential growth. We use it in our world a lot. We can use that to explain 7 billion people from 6.
Wow. Okay.
The question is, how fast does the population have to grow? Would Shem, Ham, and Japheth have to have 100 children each, 1,000 children? Actually, a lot less than that.
Okay.
If you start with 6 people and you double the population every 150 years.
Okay, now wait a second. Double the population every 150 years. Yeah. If we were to look at current population growth today, 7 billion people, we might double in less than 100 years.
Oh, a lot less than that. We're growing much, much faster than that currently.
Okay, so that's a conservative number, you're saying?
I'm saying if you start with 6 people.
6 people.
And double it every 150 years, you end up with 7 billion people in 4,500 years.
Wow.
That's a ridiculously slow growth. There's a growth rate of less than 0.5%.
Yeah.
It's really slow. I mean, I have 4 children. I doubled my population. It's easy. In fact, in the Bible, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, they have 16 sons amongst them.
Okay.
So you assume about 16 daughters. In one generation, it went from 6 people to 30 people.
Wait a second. You're saying that it's not, how do we get to 7 billion people in only 4,500 years? You're saying, I'm surprised the number isn't a lot higher.
Yes. It's trivial to get 7 billion people.
So time is not an issue here. We don't need hundreds of thousands of years of human growth. We don't need billions of years of Earth history to make this happen.
No, we actually need something to keep the population in check.
Okay.
So we need lots of warfare.
Yeah.
Starvation, disease, horrible suffering. And we know we live in a sin-cursed world. And we know people have been kind of mean to each other throughout all of human history. And so we need actually a way to keep the population from growing so quickly to explain only 7 billion people. So it's really, when you look at the numbers and the math, the numbers are on our side.
Okay, they were able to explain a bit more succinctly than I was, so that's good. Okay, well, up on the screen, we're just showing the Bible account, chronological account of Noah's family, and through Terah, we've got, well, through Shem, through his lineage, we've got Abraham, and then we end up with Jacob and Jacob's 12 sons. So this bit here is superimposed. It's a larger version up on the right-hand side. So thanks to the Bible, we can also trace the lineage of the Jews and the Arabs right back to the one patriarch being Abraham, who was born around about 2167 before Jesus. And he had 6 sons. His first was Ishmael, who was the father of the Arabs, and his second son Isaac, who was the father of Jacob, who was later called Israel. Around about 1800 BC, he had 12 sons who became the 12 tribes of Israel, better known as the nation of the Jews. So when you Google the population of the Jews today, you'll get about 15.7 million. So we're out of the billions now, we're only talking about millions. 15.7 million Jews. However, back in, those who know our history, back in 1930, it was a healthy 18 million, and we know the reasons why it's dropped. So if we apply the same logic and the same formula about doubling, so we're talking about 1800 BC to 1830, because we know what the figure was, that allows for about 20 and a half doublings for the Jewish population, which on average gives us them doubling approximately every 181 years. Now, the Jewish people have undergone a tremendous amount of persecution and slaughter over the centuries. We know about Hitler and how many he murdered during the Second World War, and it explains why they're only at 15.7 million today. Now, they would have lost many countrymen throughout the ages through disease, infant mortality and starvation, just as everybody else on the earth. The history is one of many, many battles, loss of life because of those wars, yet we find that their numbers have doubled between the 18 BC and 1930 AD at a minimum of 20 times. And as we said, that's an average rate of once every 181. So the Jewish population rate is almost the same as for our general population, even though they're a lot less. And although the doubling formula is simplistic as a mathematical formula, it provides a percentage more logical when you consider the Bible account compared to the evolutionary model. And add to that a very important question. If humans have been on the earth for millions of years, at our growth rate that we've already discussed, we know that's locked in. 8 billion today. So we know what the percentage rate is, or the average growth rate is for doubling. So where are the trillions of people who should either be alive today, or where are the buried remains? Where are the fossils? Where are the vast graveyards scattered throughout the world? It's interesting to note that when we apply the same growth rate model to doubling humans from 100 years ago, 1 million years ago, the current population should be 3.7 times 10 to the power of, it's a big number. And what that does just shows that it's impossible because we wouldn't even fit on the planet today. And that's even allowing for past disease, the famines, the pestilence, the wars, and the infant mortality. So friends, does the current population and growth rate give me a reason to believe the Bible? Yeah, it does. But it's not the only reason that I believe the Bible. And also the stats definitely don't take away from what the Bible, I believe that it's fact. Doesn't take away from it at all, it just adds to it. Plays a supporting role to dispel the theories not found in the Bible. We'll just finish up with this video.
In 2011, the world's human population reached 7 billion. How long did it take for this many humans to be born? Well, humans reproduce at a rate of around 0.4%, sometimes spiking as high as 2% or as low as 0.1%. If we calculate backward using only 0.1%, then it would only take 7,062 years to reach today's population. But what about the evolutionary scenario? It says that the first humans evolved over 2 million years ago, and that this group numbered around 10,000. If we calculate forward using the lowest historical rate of reproduction, then humans should have reached 7 billion people a long time ago. How do evolutionists answer this problem? They claim that the early human population had virtually no population growth for over 2.4 million years. Supposedly, the lack of agriculture slowed down mankind's reproduction. But let's think about that for a minute. Humans have always used agriculture. The earliest human remains and writings show evidence of agriculture. So how do humans have virtually no population growth for millions of years? Also, eons of people living on our planet would generate big piles of discarded and buried bones and many layers of their debris packed on cave floors. But the evidence is completely absent. How could the human population only recently reach 7 billion? Why not several 100,000 years ago, soon after man supposedly first evolved? We just surpassed 7 billion because humanity has been around for only thousands of years, not millions. The 2.4 million years of evolutionary history with no population growth never actually happened. The current world population precisely aligns with biblical history. No added stories needed.